Robin Williams was the man who made the whole world laugh. The moment he appeared, the atmosphere instantly changed. Faster, brighter, louder. For decades, Robin Williams was remembered as a symbol of joy, of boundless energy, of a man who seemed born solely to make others happy. But what people continue to speak about most does not live inside that laughter. It exists in the silence behind the lights, in the emptiness no role could ever fully fill, in a man who spent his life helping others forget their pain, yet seemed never to find a way to fully face his own. So who was Robin Williams when the stage disappeared? Why did a man who lived to bring joy to millions have to fight quietly, in a world almost no one could see? To understand that paradox, we must return to where this story truly began. Not in Hollywood, but in a childhood, where laughter first became a way to survive. Robin Williams was born in 1951 and grew up in a disciplined middle-class household. His father worked in an industry tied closely to the military. On the surface, it was a comfortable childhood, but beneath that surface were constant relocations, friendships barely formed before they had to be left behind. Stability, something many children take for granted, was, for Williams, as fragile as a brief stop along the way. Within that environment, young Robin learned something early on. Silence could easily turn into loneliness. Without permanent friends or a familiar rhythm of life, he began filling the emptiness with imagination. Different voices emerged. Characters appeared out of nowhere. Jokes spilled out. Not to be funny, but to connect. Laughter came before confidence. It became a bridge that helped him cross the feeling of being left behind. From there, a survival mechanism formed. At a very young age, talk fast so no one interrupts, joke first so rejection never has a chance, make others happy in order to stay. That mechanism did more than nurture talent. It shaped his personality. Always moving, always busy, always standing at the emotional front line, because the moment he slowed down, the emptiness would surface. Those early years did not create a comedy genius. They created a person who learned how to exist through the immediate responses of others. And once laughter became the safest language he knew, the next path was almost already drawn, a path where the stage was not merely a place to perform, but the only place that allowed the boy he once was to truly be seen. For Robin Williams, entering the profession did not begin with an ambition for fame. It began as an escape, a place where laughter helped him stay upright against a familiar sense of unease. Prestigious training provided technique, but it was the small stages that taught him how to survive. In front of impatient audiences, under skeptical gazes, within the pressure of now or never. The early years were anything but smooth. His improvisational style was seen as too much, too fast, too difficult to control. Time and again, he was cut short, turned away, advised to slow down. But Robin Williams did not slow down. He chose to stay, to repeat, to try again, not to prove himself right, but because stopping meant returning to silence. Those first milestones came in quick, breathless succession, scattered late-night sets, auditions that promised nothing, moments of attention that faded as quickly as they appeared. With each setback, he did not speak of faith or dreams. He simply kept showing up. It was a consistent stance. Remain present, long enough for laughter to find its footing. And when that initial flame burned hot enough, not to be extinguished by opposing winds, it began to spread, quietly yet impossible to ignore. From that contained chaos, a very different kind of radiance was taking shape, one that would soon carry him to extraordinary heights and at the same time draw him into a pressure he had never known before. The peak of Robin Williams's career did not arrive as a single explosion. It was built in layers, each layer a role, a year, a moment, in which he stepped deeper into the audience's consciousness. In the late 1970s, when Mork and Mindy went on the air, Robin Williams did not simply become famous. He became a cultural phenomenon. On screen, he spoke faster than viewers could think, moved as if his energy were inexhaustible. But what kept audiences watching was not just the laughter. It was the sensation of witnessing a mind operating live, unfiltered, without defenses. Hollywood took notice. This was not a conventional comedian. This was a living source of energy. As the 1980s unfolded, that glow did not fade. It transformed. Robin Williams gradually stepped outside the frame of just making people laugh, challenging himself with roles that demanded emotional depth. Dead Poets Society, 1989, marked a crucial turning point. For the first time, audiences saw him slow down, speak less, move more gently. Yet every line lingered. The image of the teacher standing at the podium did more than inspire. It reflected the man himself, someone who believed emotion needed to be released, even if the cost was vulnerability. By the early 1990s, Robin Williams reached a state few artists ever achieve: a box office star and a critically respected actor at the same time. Mrs. Doubtfire, 1993, brought laughter to millions of families, while The Fisher King and Awakenings revealed his willingness to enter emotional territories filled with pain, uncertainty, and fragility. He made no distinction between big roles or small ones. There were only truthful roles. That summit was sealed by a moment entirely unlike what the public had come to expect. In 1998, with Good Will Hunting, Robin Williams stood on the Oscar stage, not explosive, not animated, just a man, speaking slowly, with steady eyes and a voice full of understanding. That award did not honor noise. It honored the ability to listen, the ability to touch another person's pain through stillness. Looking back, Robin Williams's success did not come from acting better than others. It came from his willingness to open his emotions completely, without armor, without restraint. Every role was a moment of stepping in front of an audience, exposed and unprotected. But it was precisely there that an invisible pressure began to form. When a halo is created by the constant act of giving, laughter, energy, presence, the question is no longer how famous you become, but this: what is left for you? When the lights finally go out, there came a moment when Robin Williams's life entered a peak, where the lights were no longer enough to conceal what lay beneath. When fame reached its absolute height, he was no longer asked how to succeed, but confronted with a far heavier question: how to continue existing inside the very image the world demanded of him. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, his pace accelerated beyond control. Stage after stage, film after film, parties, substances, and a body constantly pushed past its limits. From the outside, it looked like the familiar portrait of a Hollywood star living life to the fullest. But behind that surface, Robin Williams began to lose the ability to stop. When his close friend John Belushi died in 1982, the shock was not merely a personal loss. It felt like a cold warning about the path he himself was on. The public saw just another name added to a tragedy. For Robin, it was the moment he realized: not everyone survives. After burning themselves for too long, he did stop. he did restart. He did try to find stability, especially as he stepped into the roles of husband and father. But life does not move in straight lines. By the 1990s, as his film career reached its peak, his personal life began to fracture, slowly and quietly. His marriages did not collapse from a lack of love, but from prolonged exhaustion. Robin Williams did not bring the noise of the stage home with him. He brought back the emptiness that followed it. A man accustomed to saving others with laughter did not know how to set himself down when there was no role left to cling to. By the 2000s, the signs became harder to ignore. Returns to treatment, periods of relapse. The press reported them in a flat, familiar tone, as if they were just another cycle in the life of a troubled star. But looked at more closely, these were not repeated downfalls. They were attempts to survive. Addiction in this case was not recklessness. It was a way to quiet the noise inside, to sleep, to have a few hours, without having to be Robin Williams for the world. As time went on, the battle was no longer confined to the mind. His body began to betray him. Symptoms appeared that were difficult to name. Extreme anxiety, disorientation, a deep sense of unease without clear cause. He and his family searched for answers in medicine, but for a long time all they received was uncertainty. Only later did the truth emerge. He was suffering from Lewy body dementia, a degenerative brain disease that destroys cognition while suffocating emotion. While he was alive, Robin Williams only knew this much. The thing that had once been his greatest source of life, a quick mind and open emotional range, was slowly becoming the most dangerous place to live. And so everything converged at once. Fame forced him to remain visible. Family bore the weight of a man who was never truly allowed to rest. Addiction became a short-term escape. Illness quietly locked the doors from the inside. No scandal was ever large enough to fully tell this story, because Robin Williams's tragedy was not loud. It unfolded in the silences after laughter, in sleepless nights, in the feeling of having nowhere to place one's pain, without disappointing someone else. There are pains that, the more carefully they are hidden, the more devastating they become, when there is no refuge left. And to understand why all of this was not a series of isolated accidents, but a recurring trajectory throughout his life, we must go deeper into the psychological pattern that followed Robin Williams from very early on. If we view Robin Williams's life as a straight line, his tragedy does not lie in sudden collapses. It lies in a repeating pattern, quiet yet persistent, that followed him from a very early age. From an unstable childhood, Robin Williams learned how to survive through immediate feedback. When he made others laugh, he was allowed to stay. When he generated energy, he felt he had value. That mechanism carried him into his profession, working without pause, speaking without pause, giving without pause. As if, the moment he slowed down, the emptiness would instantly surface. And when success arrived, that pattern did not disappear. It was applauded. It was rewarded. It was called talent. At the height of his career, that very pattern allowed him to shine. His improvisation, speed, and wide-open emotional range made audiences feel deeply touched. But at the same time, it created an opposite consequence. Robin Williams did not know how to exist in stillness. Fame did not heal his insecurity. It only made that insecurity more dependent on the gaze of others. The more he was loved, the more he feared. The moment he would no longer have enough energy to give back. As pressure mounted, the old pattern responded in the only way it knew, by filling the space. filling it with work, filling it with laughter. And when those were no longer strong enough, filling it with substances, with relentless momentum, with denying himself the chance to be alone for too long. The danger did not lie in a single wrong decision. It lay in the fact that every decision moved in the same direction, avoiding direct contact with the inner void. When his health began to decline, that pattern stopped working. The mind, once capable of controlling every situation, became unpredictable. The body, once able to endure any pace, began to resist. And when Robin Williams could no longer sustain the image that this very pattern had created, he became trapped between two fears: the fear of continuing to give until total exhaustion, and the fear of stopping and facing himself. The psychological truth here is not that he was weak. It is this: a mechanism that once saved him from loneliness, followed him throughout his life, and at a certain point became something he could no longer escape. What helps a person survive childhood is not always what keeps them safe in adulthood. And once we understand that pattern, we begin to see clearly why the wounds in his private life were not merely the consequences of fame, but the inevitable destination of a man who had lived for too long on the front lines of emotion. When the lights went out, Robin Williams did not step away as the person audiences had grown accustomed to. He slowed down, he spoke less, and he carried a very ordinary wish: to be a husband, a father, a man, no longer burdened with the task of making someone else happy. His marriages followed one another through a life marked by constant turbulence. Each time he began again, Robin Williams entered with the belief that family could be a refuge, a place where he could finally set down the role he carried all day. He had children, and in the role of a father, his gentleness was no longer performance. Those were rare moments when he could remain inside a relationship that did not demand immediate feedback, that did not require laughter to confirm his worth. But the career he built did not know how to stop at the right time. Dense shooting schedules, relentless work rhythms, and a mind constantly pushed to its highest setting tore his private life into fragments. Robin Williams did not bring the noise of the stage home. He brought the emptiness that followed it. He could be deeply warm in brief moments, then suddenly withdraw when his energy was depleted. Over time, the closest relationships bore the heaviest weight of that cycle. Off stage, his true temperament stood far from his public image. Robin Williams was not someone who was always explosive. He was sensitive, reflective, and constantly questioning himself. He read extensively, thought deeply, and carried a quiet fear: the fear of disappointing others when he no longer had the strength to shine. These private struggles were rarely spoken aloud, not because he wanted to hide them, but because he was unaccustomed to placing his burdens on someone else's shoulders. In his later years, the way he viewed life beyond the stage began to shift. Fame was no longer the goal. He sought smaller things: silence, mornings without schedules, conversations that did not need to end in laughter. This was not a retreat from the world. It was an effort to return to being human after too many years of living as an extended role. And from those very human silences, a quiet turning point began to emerge, when family was no longer strong enough to shield him. When body and mind could no longer answer the old pace, Robin Williams was forced to face a question he had never prepared to answer: continue straining to become the person the world needed, or stop and listen to the truth within himself. That moment came without collapse, only a prolonged silence. And it was that silence that opened the door to everything that followed. In the summer of 2014, in Tiburon, California, Robin Williams entered a phase in which everything that had once held him up suddenly became fragile. From the outside, there was no public fall, no new scandal, no sign of a loud, dramatic tragedy. There was only a man slowly retreating into long stretches of silence, as if he were trying to learn a different way of existing, one that was slower, quieter, and less exposed. By that time, his health was no longer something that could be ignored. Neurological disorders were steadily eroding the sense of safety within his own body. A mind that had once been lightning fast became unpredictable. Emotions shifted without warning. For someone who had lived by speed and by a finely tuned control of emotional timing, this was the deepest fear imaginable. At the same time, the psychological weight accumulated over decades, the pressure to always be present, to always have enough energy, has had nowhere to go. His family was there, but no one could step inside and carry that burden for him. At this point, the question is no longer what he chose. The question is whether he had any real choices left. When every familiar escape route had closed, when work no longer distracted, laughter was no longer strong enough, and the body itself refused the old rhythm. The turning point did not arrive as a sharp decision, but as the long-delayed consequence of years of self-exhaustion. That moment held no drama, no declaration, only a man, standing at a threshold beyond the reach of the lights, forced to face his greatest fear, remaining with himself, without protective armor. And it is here that the story reaches its emotional peak, not because the tragedy occurs, but because of the silence that precedes it. Because sometimes the most painful thing is not the final choice, but the realization that every other choice has already, one by one, disappeared. In the final years of his life, Robin Williams lived at a rhythm, completely different from the image the world had once known. No more packed schedules, no more back-to-back performances. Life narrowed into very ordinary days, slow mornings, long hours at home, outings where he no longer had to transform himself into a radiant version of who he was expected to be. By then, his health no longer allowed for explosive energy. Neurological disorders kept both body and mind in a constant state of unease. There were days when he felt lost inside his own familiar home, moments when memory could no longer be trusted. But the most significant change was not the illness itself. It was the way he lived alongside it. Robin Williams stopped masking exhaustion with laughter. He began to accept that there were days when he was not okay, and that he did not have to make someone else happy in order to be allowed to stay. Away from public view, he lived more quietly, spoke less. Those close to him said he preferred small conversations, no crescendos, no need for a punchline at the end. He sought quiet as a matter of survival, not escape. In that space, he was not an icon, not an emotional savior, just a man, trying to keep his balance between good days and very hard ones. The deepest shift was philosophical. Robin Williams no longer measured his worth by his level of visibility. He began to see life as a series of moments to be preserved, not consumed. There was no need to shine all the time, no need to prove anything, only the need to be calm enough not to be swept away again. His life after the spotlight was not loud nor inspirational in the familiar sense. It was deeply human. There were days that passed without anyone knowing what he had done. Silences that left no trace. Yet within that disappearance, Robin Williams experienced, perhaps for the first time, what it meant to live without being stretched taut by the world's gaze. And when the noise had finally faded, the question that remained was not what he had lost, but this. What did he leave behind when he was no longer visible? As the noise of life gradually recedes, Robin Williams' legacy does not appear as a sealed monument, but as a current that continues to spread quietly. He is remembered first for the roles that etched themselves into our collective memory, not merely because they were successful, but because they touched emotional territories. Cinema rarely dares to linger in. From explosive laughter to moments of stillness, Robin Williams expanded the range of performance, proving that an artist can make people laugh, and at the same time lead them to face their own sorrow, without being forced to choose one over the other. Yet his lasting value extends far beyond the screen. In social life, Robin Williams chose a presence, very different from the usual image of a star. He showed up for communities easily forgotten, veterans, the homeless, people living on the margins, not to tell his own story, but to listen to theirs. That kindness did not require media validation, yet it quietly set a standard. True influence does not need noise to exist. From this, Robin Williams fundamentally changed how comedians are perceived. He broke down the rigid boundary between entertainment and depth, between humor and wounding. He showed that laughter is not a mask. It can be the shortest path to empathy. And when art is built on fully open emotion, it does not merely amuse the audience, it helps them recognize themselves. The standard he left behind is therefore fragile, yet enduring. The courage to live and create without hiding one's vulnerability. There is no need to become a flawless model, no need to be strong all the time, only the need to be truthful, even when the price of that truth can be painfully high. It is a difficult standard, one not everyone is safe enough to pursue, but it opened a new space for the artists who followed. And that is why Robin Williams continues to be remembered, not only for what he accomplished, but for the question. He represents one that never grows old. How do we treat those who spend their entire lives making others feel okay? His legacy does not demand absolute reverence. It asks for attention, for listening, and for a little more gentleness toward those who stand beneath the lights. After everything, what remains is not an untouchable legend, but a profoundly human imprint. A reminder that art can save many people, but only truly matters when it does not require the artist to sacrifice themselves to keep the light alive. Robin Williams' story does not close with a complete explanation. It comes to rest in a silence, a place where laughter is no longer an obligation and the spotlight is no longer a condition for existence. In that silence, a simple truth becomes clear. Some people bring light to the world, and by burning themselves, and the world does not always know how to keep them safe. If this journey leaves anything behind, it is not a verdict of right or wrong. It is a reminder. Listen more carefully to those who always seem fine. Be gentler with smiles that shine too brightly, because behind them, there may be someone simply trying to survive. If this story made you slow down for a moment, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe that silence too deserves to be heard,